Good evening, everybody. I'm Audra Carroll, and you're listening to Coming in Hot, where myself and my guest, we talk about mindset theories most of the time and give you real practical ways at how you can improve your lifestyle, relationships, your health, and yourself. So tonight, you got little old me, and I'm going to talk to you about kind of what I was talking about last week. Stress, not balancing, but stress and anxiety. So it is something that is near and dear to my heart because it is something that I have dealt with and some of my family members have dealt with for many years, and it goes generations back. So, anyway, that being said, that's why I'm doing the show, because I'm needing to regroup after all of this that's been going on, and I made a list. I had a list. George is going to be not surprised. So, anyway, why am I desperately needing to regroup? Let me count all of the ways. The coronavirus restrictions, balancing work and this podcast. Oh yeah, I've taken on 3 kids homeschooling. Most of you have done the same thing, and all the changes that come along with that. I'm telling you guys, Rome was not built in a day. I know that Shelly and I discussed this last week, balancing, and I took some really good tips away, but I'm telling y'all right now, when it comes to application, I might need a little bit of help. I may need Shelly to move into my house for like a week. Maybe like super nanny, come in and like whip me into shape and all that kind of good stuff. So just go back and check out episode 2. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. She's the bomb. She's amazing. Okay, back to counting my ways. Okay, so maybe 3 weeks ago, while I was walking and jogging, I stepped off in a pothole because I was multitasking, walking, and I don't have it by me, but I was texting on my phone. So probably, or picking a song, who knows. But anyway, I stepped off in a pothole and it jacked up my neck. And so I've been dealing with, for several weeks, I was dealing with some chronic pain back here that was giving me headaches every evening. So it was pretty intense. Every evening I've been like out of order, like half of the evenings for the past 3 weeks. Then I have 1 dog, 2 cats, 2 rats now. R.I.P. El Capitan, poor baby. He passed away on Monday. So he was our poor little hairless rat, our sweet little puppy. So anyway, everybody give a shout out to Angel, because she was a good mommy. She was a very, very good mommy. We got 5 hens that are stinking up the house, and I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you. The coop is 65% dismantled so that we can start all over, basically, and make it better than the last one, because we just kind of threw together the last one. So that's a hot mess right now. 10,000 loads of laundry, no exaggeration. I'm telling you, about 10,000. And now all of a sudden, my 7-year-old doesn't want to sleep in her bed. I'm like, and I know she just wants mommy time. I know that's all she wants is mommy time, but I just want some me time too, and I can't seem to find it. So we are still having fun trying to get all of that stuff together. So anyway, with that all being said, let's buckle up for some good information. And we're going to talk about some of the signs and symptoms of anxiety, but then we're going to dive into the connection to the brain. And we're going to explore how the brain, how you can rewire the brain. It's quite interesting. It's super fascinating to me. This stuff right here rocked my world. So anyway, I'm super excited to dive in further and share a little bit more with you. So anyway, if you can relate to any of the things that I just listed, my negative Nancy, we get her out of the way right off the bat, then you're in the right place. So let's see, I've counted all of my ways. So anyway, yesterday while I was in the midst of trying to put together this show and everything, and it was pretty stressful, as it usually is, but I'm getting it together. I'm working on it. I started questioning myself. I'm like, okay, so what am I doing wrong here? I've learned that I need to evaluate myself and maybe look at what I'm doing physically and what I'm doing mentally when I feel everything is kind of a little out of balance. So I started questioning, what am I doing physically every day and what am I doing mentally? Not really how am I feeling, but what am I actually doing? Self-evaluation. And of course, that led me into habits. So I'm going to start off with a definition of the definition of habits. So we're going to go to school. Don't be scared. I'm not a very good teacher, though. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that right now. Okay. The definition of habits: an acquired mode of behavior that has become nearly or completely involuntary, which I find super fascinating because I'm going to read it one more time. An acquired mode of behavior that has become nearly or completely involuntary. Now, mind you, this is the definition of habits. So it's anything involuntary. So now we're talking about the subconscious mind, right? So that, talking about that, and it says involuntary behavior, things like that, obviously made me think about addiction. And so I'm going to read you another definition. So hold tight. The definition of addiction: a compulsive, chronic, physiological, or psychological need for a habit, a forming substance, behavior, or activity having harmful physical, psychological, or social effects, and typically causing well-defined symptoms such as anxiety, irritability, tremors, or nausea. Upon withdrawal or abstinence, the state of being addicted. There's also one more. It says a strong inclination to do, use, or indulge in something repeatedly. So again, I picked out a few, words in there that stuck out to me. In addiction, it says it's compulsive. It's a need to basically redo a ritual, kind of a thing. Ritual's not written in here, but that's kind of what it's saying to me. So anyway, so the definition of addiction. I'm sure y'all caught that in there. Let me grab my papers over here. Hopefully you caught that in that definition of addiction was the word anxiety. So I wanted to talk to you about my connection to anxiety and my family's connection. So not only do I deal with this and struggle with this off and on and have for many, many years, if I had to go back, it's from my childhood for sure. And there's been different times throughout my life that it's been heightened and things like that. And like I said, it's generational as well. So I can see it back as far on both sides of my genealogy, my maternal and my paternal side. And I also see it in my children now. And so I, a long time ago, decided that I needed to really, really dig in and figure out a different way to try to handle this, because I went the regular route with pharmaceuticals and all that kind of stuff, and it was just not working for me. And so I really needed to see what else there was out there. And so that led me into looking into what actually triggers anxiety. What are the signs and symptoms of anxiety? Because I think that we think we know what they are, but I actually think that there's a lot more to it, and there's a lot more layers to it than what we give credit for. Can I get a time check?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay, I got a little bit more time. So we're going to do that. Actually, I take that back. I would like to talk to you a little bit more about anxiety. According to the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, anxiety is the most common condition that affects 18.1% of the U.S. population. Now, I read that statistic yesterday, and I've got to say, I kind of think that that's pretty lean, because like I mentioned before, you can go and you can Google and you can find all of the most common symptoms of anxiety, or you can look at your friend next to you and you can see the most common ones that everyone talks about every day. But there's a lot of underlying small little things that we think are just habits that maybe are signs of anxiety. And so when we come back from commercial, I think we're going to dive into that, and we're going to discuss the depths and the layers of the different signs and symptoms. So stick around, and there's going to be much more. Okay. How close did I get to 13 minutes?
2.5 on.
I stopped it quick, huh?
Yeah, no, you could have done more.
So how long did I go? 11 minutes? That's short. Minute now or not? I don't know if it's recording or not, Dylan. Oh, I think it is now. The gray went off.
Mm.
Okay. Now I think we're recording. Hopefully we're recording again. It's moving. Oh, he's teaching me.
There you go.
Thanks, dude. My sidekick, couldn't do it without him.
Psychic?
Why do you always have to make fun of the way I say stuff? All right. Okay, so you can count me back in a second, and I will be ready to do segment 3, I believe.
Segment 2.
Yeah, segment 2, my bad. Hold on, let me see where this right here goes. This is gonna go. Okay. All right, you can count me in.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome back. So I know I sound all chipper and everything, but we're talking about something serious tonight, something very near and dear to my heart. We're talking about anxiety. And the last segment, we talked about habits and addiction and anxiety and all of the ways that I am being driven up a wall right now and really having to put my coping skills and everything that I've learned to the test. So I kind of got stuck a second ago and couldn't find my definition of anxiety, but I found it. So let's jump right back in with that. The definition of anxiety. The first one is apprehensiveness, uneasiness, or nervousness, usually over an impending or anticipated ill. Then there's also a medical definition for it. An abnormal or overwhelming sense of apprehension and fear, often marked by physical signs such as tension, sweat, and increased pulse rate. By doubt concerning the reality and nature of the threat, and self-doubt about what one's capacity to cope with it may be. So like I said before about a statistic I had recently read, it said that like 18.1% of Americans are dealing with anxiety, and I totally think that's lean. And then add the whole COVID pandemic thing on top of that, I totally know that that's definitely not accurate now. Now we're comparing apples to oranges, I should say, but I don't know if anyone else has heard this, but the last statistic I had heard was that alcohol sales had went up 40% since this pandemic had really kicked off. So that honestly kind of made me a little bit scared. But let's talk about some of the signs and symptoms of anxiety, because everyone thinks that they know most of them, but there's quite a few of them, to be honest. And I have a little list here because it's just too many. Feeling nervous, restless, or tense. Having a sense of impending danger, panic, or doom. Having increased heart rate. Breathing rapidly, sweating and trembling. Feeling weak or tired. Trouble concentrating or thinking about anything other than the present worry. Having trouble sleeping. Experiencing GI problems. Having difficulty controlling worry. Having to avoid things that trigger anxiety. And becoming addicted or rewired to being anxious. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that, but we're going to touch on that in just a little bit as well. So those are the most common ones that you're going to see listed on the Mayo Clinic and things like that. And those are going to be the ones your doctor is going to ask you about. And I personally have experienced a lot of those, as I'm sure many of you have that have anxiety. Like I said, there's many varying levels of anxiety. And so a few other things that I jotted down that I had noticed from my own personal experience that were symptoms of anxiety I didn't actually maybe recognize as anxiety. So being indecisive, The reason why sometimes we're indecisive is because we are so overwhelmed. Our brains are trying to process so many things at one time because we're trying to take care of everything. And so sometimes I know it can be aggravating, but we'll be super indecisive. And it's because we are so worried about making the wrong decision. So we just won't make a decision. So that's definitely me. Feeling restless, on the edge, and unable to relax. That one, I'm going to put that one in perspective. Now, you can look at that, and there's a lot of people that have major social anxieties where they cannot go outside and be in crowds and things like that. And I'm super beyond grateful that I do not have those issues. However, the way I relate this back to me is off and on for many years, I will sometimes have so much anxious, nervous energy that I will not be able to sit down and enjoy watching a movie with my family. And it's awful. And 9 times out of 10, I have to get up and do something physical. So there's definitely something going on in my body and I just cannot contain it. And I just have to get up and I just have to move around. So that's one of the ways that has played out for me in being restless and on edge sometimes when I know that it shouldn't be that way. I should be able to sit back and kick back, and enjoy. I work hard. So irritability, that's another one. Irritability, everybody takes it personally, and I don't blame you because I don't like it when anybody ain't nice to me. However, I have noticed that something that I had to work on was my irritability. A lot of times with people that are anxious is it will come across and you will take out your frustrations about your anxiety on someone else around you. And that is so not fun, not only for them, but obviously not for yourself. Who wants to be doing that? You don't want to be the nagger and the person, you don't want to be the brat. Who wants to be the brat? So for me, if I am super duper anxious and I've got a lot of things going on and I get interrupted and I might snap, that right there is a sign that I am doing way too many things, that a small interruption will send me over the edge like a volcano. So that's another one that I have to watch with myself. Some other things that people do very commonly, and you would call them a habit. Let's go back to habits again. But they can actually be harmful as well, is lip biting. That's one that I do. Like, y'all, it's awful. Lip biting is probably one of the things that I probably do the most often. Nail biting, hair plucking, pulling at the eyebrows, eyelashes, things like that, or pinching or scratching, things along those lines. Things like that are all signs and symptoms of anxiety, and it's just manifesting in different types of ways. So everybody's different. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on is alcohol. So like I said, the statistic before, alcohol sales have went up 40% since this pandemic really kicked off. And that is a staggering number to me as someone who does no longer drink alcohol and who makes it a point to make sure that I don't indulge because I don't want to overindulge. So alcohol is another one that is used quite often to deal with anxiety or can manifest itself in a very negative way. So overindulging when you just feel like you need to take the edge off. If you're doing it often, then there might be something you need to look into because there's probably something going on psychologically that you just need to deal with. And as much as it may suck, getting through it and walking through it is how you're going to get past it and on the other side. So anyway, so when we talk about habits and things like that, all of these things, they're subconscious. So it's definitely in the subconscious mind. And I wanted to read a quote to you by Dr. Joe Dispenza, who I mentioned before. I absolutely adore him and all of the great work that he does. But he says when it comes to anxiety and stress, thoughts alone can trigger the human stress response. And here's the most important part, guys. And keep it going. So it can keep it going. So that right there, to put it in perspective when we're talking about anxiety, this doctor is letting you know that it is very hard for someone who has anxiety to be able to overcome a chemical reaction that happens in the body when anxiety is triggered. It's the fight or flight that kicks in. And so there's this whole chemical reaction that happens within the body. And once the anxiety is triggered, the only way to stop it is to have the brain tell the body to calm down. But you see, that's very difficult for a person who is in the midst of fight or flight because we are in protection mode. We're like trying to save our lives right now. It may not seem like it to you, but in our minds, we're trying to save our lives and our bodies are showing the reactions of that. So even if you can't see it on our face, you can see it manifest physically, and it's fascinating what the body does when it feels like it is in danger and it needs to protect itself. So anyway, it's not easy doing this type of stuff and learning how to deal with the anxious triggers and things like that. And so in the last segment, that's kind of what we're going to talk about. We're going to discuss how do you go about teaching your body how to react differently to the different stresses and stimulations that come up that trigger your anxious reaction. So that's what we're going to discuss in the last segment. So stick around and I hope you're excited. Okay. How much time was that?
Same.
11?
Actually, you went back a minute.
It was 10 minutes?
You are fairly long.
Okay, so we should be recording again. Yeah. Okay, you can go and cue me in whenever you want.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome back. So if you're just tuning in, this is Audra Carroll, and this is Coming in Hot, and we are knee deep in mindset theories about rewiring the brain, when especially it comes to anxiety and anxious behaviors and dealing with stressful situations. So in the previous 2 segments, we discussed a lot of stuff, and I left you off with talking about anxiety being driven by the subconscious mind, a lot of it. And I had left you with a quote by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and it was, "Thoughts alone can trigger the human stress response and keep it going," which is the most important part that I want you to take away, is that if it's triggered, it can keep going. So it's hard, to tell someone who's in the midst of an anxiety attack or something going on, to just calm down and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't work. We're having a chemical reaction in our bodies. So unless you can go in and tell us to stop running from, our past, like a caveman, it's just not going to work. And follow Dr. Joe. You'll know what I'm getting at. Some of you already know what I'm talking about. So anyway, back to this, the body is prepared for battle. So that's why it's not easy to calm us down when we're in the midst of all that. So this is not easy things to do at all. Super duper difficult, but so super worth all of the work. So let me see, as we're going through life and we're getting older, we all want to make sure that we are learning from our mistakes, That's where wisdom comes from. Knowledge means nothing. Wisdom is everything. So as we're going through and we're learning from our mistakes and our past histories and everything, we have to learn maybe new approaches to stuff. And I've mentioned Dr. Joe several times. And to give you a little bit about his background, he has his doctorate in chiropractic degree. He's a postgraduate training. His training was he covered neurology, neuroscience, brain function and chemistry, cellular biology, memory formation, aging, and longevity. He's an international lecturer, researcher, corporate consultant, author, and educator. And I have personally been following him for a while now, and I poured myself into all of his lectures. And I would like to play a video for you now. So anyone that follows me on Facebook, you'll be able to view the video. And it is a fabulous artist who's putting the final touches on a beautiful piece of artwork, while Dr. Joe Dispenza speaks about stress and thoughts. And so I want you to take a minute and get yourself situated so that you can sit down and view, or so that you can really open up your mind and listen to what Dr. Joe has to say.
According to the psychological and scientific model, the majority of people in their waking day, in a normal day, spend about 70% of their time living in stress. And living in stress is living in survival. And the actual definition of stress is when your body's knocked out of homeostasis. Stress is when your body's knocked out of balance. The stress response is what your body innately does to return itself back to order.
Right.
You have three types of stress. You have physical stress, like trauma, injuries, accidents, falls. You have chemical stress, like bacteria, viruses, blood sugar levels, heavy metals in food, hangovers, whatever. And you have emotional stress, like traffic jams, internet connections, second mortgages, single parenting, 401ks, family tragedies. All of those things knock the brain and body out of balance. Now, all organisms in nature can adapt to short-term stress. A pack of coyotes chases a deer in the forest. The deer outruns the coyotes. The stress is over. The deer returns back to homeostasis and it grazes again. The event is over. When the deer perceives a threat in its external environment, it turns on a primitive nervous system called the fight or flight nervous system. And that autonomic nervous system, that sympathetic nervous system, begins to mobilize enormous amounts of energy for some threat in the external environment. Now, deer has all its physiology changed, all the blood is sent to the extremities, heart rate increases, respiratory rate increases, pupils dilate. The 1,300 chemicals that are created in a matter of seconds is to cause the deer to survive in some difficult condition. Now, human beings have the same mechanisms, and when we perceive a threat in our external environment, like a lion, we are going to run or fight or freeze. But if you've had problems with your coworker, or you've had a very difficult experience with your mother-in-law, the moment you perceive your mother-in-law or your coworker, you have a past experience with them, you're going to turn on the same primitive nervous system just like you were being chased by a lion. So what was once highly adaptive now becomes very maladaptive, because when you're mobilizing all of that energy, you are going to operate in very predictable ways. You're going to be an amped up animal with a big memory bank. So that your blood flow is going to go to the hindbrain and away from the forebrain, which means you're going to react instead of think, rationalize. But human beings, the privilege of being a human being is that we can make thought more real than anything else. That's the privilege. So then you can begin to forecast some future worst case scenario. And you can attend to that thought to the exclusion of everything else. And you can focus on it to such a degree that you will begin to anticipate the event and produce the same chemicals as if you were in that experience. And you're knocking your brain and body out of balance just by thought alone. You can begin to unfold some past bitter memory that's tattooed in the recesses of your gray matter. And like magic, you can bring it to life. And in that moment, it's real. And you will produce the same chemistry in your brain and body as if that event occurred. And your body, as the unconscious mind, is literally living that experience. So then, when we're living by the hormones of stress, and you turn on that stress response, and you can't turn it off, now you're headed for some disease. Because no organism in nature can tolerate living in emergency mode for extended periods of time. So if 70% of the time a person's living in survival, living in stress, in survival, what we do in order to survive is we are going to select the worst case scenario. And we are going to begin to plan our behaviors and our emotions in that experience, because anything less than the worst case scenario means we have better chances of survival. So we plan for the worst, we emotionally embrace it, and anything less means we can survive. So out of the infinite potentials in the quantum field, anxiety really represents a poor imagination, but it's highly adaptive if you're living in survival, because you got to get ready for that. So 70% of the time, people are selecting the worst case event in their life and emotionally embracing it, and they're programming their autonomic nervous system into a very specific destiny. And it turns out if you keep doing that and you create the emotions of fear and worry and anxiety, and you do that for 10 years or 5 years or 3 years, your body is going to unconsciously become programmed to fear. And it's going to have a panic attack without you. Try as you may with your conscious mind to control it, you've programmed it subconsciously. And now the body as the mind is running the show. So The hormones of stress create the emotions of anger, of aggression, of hostility, of violence, of frustration, of hatred, of fear, of anxiety, of guilt, of shame, of hopelessness, of powerlessness, depression. Those are all chemicals that are derived from the hormones of stress. And when we live by the hormones of stress, we become very selfish. Why? Because when you're in survival, you got to take care of the self. Your attention is on your body, right? Your attention is on your external environment. There's predators out there. The rush of adrenaline causes the senses to become heightened, and you're a materialist, and you're trying to predict the future because there's better chances of survival if you can predict the future based on the past. When that occurs then, over time, the body begins to break down because it's a scientific fact that the hormones of stress downregulate genes to create disease in the long term. So if you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, and the hormones of stress can make you sick, then your thoughts can literally make you sick. So the question is, if your thoughts can make you sick, is it possible then that your thoughts can make you well?
Okay. So like I said, I warned you. I hope you were sitting down. I hope you were ready to absorb that information. How many of you are as mind blown as I am? I'm so curious to see. Hit me up, because I'm telling you what, it rocked my world. I was like, are you kidding me? I can rewire my brain, and it's really just through habits. Are you kidding me? I was like, whoa. So really, really rocked my world. But you know, to elaborate more on what he's talking about, an anxious mind and stuff like that, it's already overstimulated. So some of the ways to deal with getting that under control is through habits and creating new habits. You know, we don't exactly break bad habits. We replace bad habits with good habits. So if you give yourself a choice, and it's that simple, and it's just about practicing. It doesn't come easy, like I said, not at all, but with lots of practice, and you continue to be persistent about it and believe in yourself, just little baby steps, and you can start to overcome some of the little small triggers, and then eventually you start to bite into the big triggers that really get you. So anyway, you know, I'd like to tell you some of the things that have worked for me that I put to use and have helped me get back on track when I fall off. So, you know, because when you come home and it's been a really, really stressful day and everything, I know that we all just want to sit down and check out for a little while, but that's not really living life, guys. Let's just be real. That's not living life. To vacation and have time off and to relax, we all need that. We all need recuperation time. Self-care and self-love, that is so important, and people think it's very selfish, and it's honestly the most selfless thing you can do for everyone around you, because you have to take care of yourself first before you can take care of anybody else. So again, I'm trying to eat the microphone. My bad. So anyway, some of the things that helped me, I'm going to name off. The first thing was meditation. That started off in a yoga class, and body scan meditation is probably the easiest way to get into it. So that's what I would recommend. Just go to YouTube and pick out a voice that you like. You know, you don't have to like everything. Not everybody's for everybody. So you want to find something that really, really works for you. But I've found that body scan meditations seem to be the easiest ones to be able to kind of get into and to get yourself relaxed and connected. And then I've moved on from there, and I've graduated to like visualization meditations, but there's all different kinds of meditations you can do. And then another big one was prayer. I have always been a person of faith. However, I most certainly set that aside to try to trot my own path and do my own thing, and noticed and realized after a while that faith is actually what got me through a lot of the roughest times I'd ever been through in my life. And that lack of faith, me setting it aside, was really doing me a disservice. So if you are a person of faith and you haven't been practicing, I would urge you to please practice and pray. Practice leaning in and giving away all of that anxiety and what really truly is bothering you. Get down to the nitty gritty, get down in that brain and find out what it is that is really, really causing this, and really practice giving it over. It's not easy. Again, disclaimer, but just keep trying. It'll get easier over time. Reading all kinds of books. One of the most popular ones that I read recently is Open Book by Jessica Simpson. I highly, 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 highly recommend it. I have also read Think and Grow Rich. And there's so many over there. I've got a whole book. I meant to bring my stack over here, but I didn't. But reading, you want to fill your brain with things that are going to help you grow. There's always downtime. There's time for the video games, and there's time for a romance novel and for fantasy and all of that. But you really want to take your time, especially if you're a person that has an anxious mind and you want to overcome that. You want to take the time to figure out, you want to read the books that will actually teach you how to do that and how to learn about yourself a lot more. Because the more you learn about yourself, the more you're going to be able to whip yourself in line and get things back together the way you need them to be. Exercise. I'm going to actually read you a little bit of what information that I found about exercise. I'm a jogger and a runner. Those are my two favorite things to do. And I don't know if you guys know this, but when you exercise, it releases endorphins. And those endorphins are like the body's natural painkillers. But they also are cannabis-like, and I say that all excited, right? But anyway, they release like cannabis-like chemicals onto the brain, and so it helps increase the sense of well-being. And adrenaline is released, and serotonin and dopamine, all of the happy hormones. So that's why exercise is so highly recommended when you're dealing with anxiety and depression and things like that. So, as like we've learned before, anxiety being a chemical reaction, a lot of the things that you can do to cope and deal with those also set off a chemical reaction that can combat it. So, and then the last thing I was going to mention is therapy. I have utilized therapy off and on throughout my life, and it has been extremely beneficial to me and to my family members. And cognitive behavioral and mindful behavioral based therapies are two of the ones that I think are fabulous to look into, but there are many different types. So just look into what may be the best for you. And I know there's a huge stigma with therapy, but they're not there to really shrink your brain, people. They're there to help you get back on your path when you've kind of fallen off, with a little bit of guidance, because we can always use a little bit of guidance. We don't know everything, even though we like to think we do. So anyway, I feel like I really got my most comfortable in the last segment. So anyway, that's a little crazy, but I really, truly, truly, truly hope that this information helps somebody else, because like I said, it was massive information for me. And dealing with everything going on right now, I thought, I need to get back to my basics. So what are my basics? And I thought I'm going to share my basics with you guys. So make sure that you find me on Facebook, Instagram, look up Coming in Hot, and I'm on astronetradio.com, obviously, and all of the major podcast apps. The last thing I'm going to leave you with is one more quote by Dr. Joe Dispenza. And I hope that you will take this to heart and maybe burn these on your spirit. So anyway, this is what I'm going to leave you with. To be empowered, to be free, to be unlimited, to be creative, to be genius, to be divine. That is who you are. Once you feel this way, memorize this feeling. Remember this feeling, because this is who you really are. You guys have a great night. See you next week. Okay.